You are listening to That Big CEO Energy, where we talk all things business, life, marriage to create an impactful community, teaching you how to lead your life and your business with compassionate strength. It can be scary stepping out from the barriers we still carry while we were once employees and change the narrative to take charge of your business and team. This podcast is a place for you to come to learn to do just that. From personal experiences, interviewing new friends, I hope that you will tune in to listen all that living that big CEO energy can offer you and your business. I'm your host, Callie, entrepreneur and fractional COO. Let's jump in. Building your business also means that you are building people. And we can all agree that without having people to help us throughout our business, we don't get very far. And so, as you continue to grow your business, as you continue to move through the building blocks, you will come to a fork in the road. And that fork in the road really is, do I continue to have independent contractors? Do I get employees? And what does that look like? I think sometimes we don't think about crossing that bridge until it's almost too late. But one of the things when you are building the structure of your business is to lay out what that will mean for the people that help you along in your business. And what are the implications that your business needs to know whether you decide to keep contract workers or bring them on as employees? So, today we're going to walk through a lot of the fundamentals between what is a contractor, what is an employee, so that you can really understand and begin to conceptualize if that is going to be a good fit for you either way. And when you learn the key differences between what a contractor actually is and what an employee actually is, you then can begin to hire the right type of workers for your business and understand what that will continue to look like and really be able to understand from a IRS perspective what is going to be the best for you. So, what is an employee? I think we can all agree that we know that an employee is on a company's payroll. We receive wages and benefits in exchange for following your organization's guidelines, being loyal and showing up every day and doing their work. A contractor is an independent worker who has autonomy and flexibility and doesn't receive benefits such as health insurance, paid time off, and you're not paying taxes for that person. So, why is this important? Being able to distinguish what an employee does and what a contractor does allows you to understand if you are misclassifying a worker. Because when you misclassify a worker, that can actually result in some back taxes, fines, penalties, legal disputes, all of the things. So we are going to peel back this onion layer because I think sometimes we assume that if a contractor is coming on board, that they are able to do just about anything. And when we assume that they can do just about anything, that's when we start to get into trouble. So let's break this down. What is a contractor? A contractor is also called an independent contractor, a contract worker, a freelancer. They usually are some self-employed individual who operates independently on a contract basis. And so you have an individual contract with them. And they're not an employee, but instead they probably run their own entity, such as, an LLC, like myself. They might be a sole proprietor, and they're contracted out by your organization to work on particular projects or assignments. And their contract relationship can be short or long term. It just sort of depends. And they likely are working for the company, but you're not technically paying them out of your payroll. And they usually work for multiple companies at the same time. So for me, that looks like I have multiple clients. I do some of the similar things between them. But really, at the end of the day, I am an independent contractor. And so I provide them with a W-9 when I get started, and they provide me with a 1099 at the end of the year. And I am responsible for paying those taxes. One of the biggest differences between the contractors and the employees is that they're paid and taxed. And an employee is on the business payroll so that the company pays the employee an hourly wage and withholds then the appropriate taxes for federal, Social Security, Medicare, things of that nature. And they also pay most of the time for a portion or all of the employee benefits. It just sort of depends on how that is structured. And employee benefits, right, usually are health insurance, desirable benefits, flex spending accounts, HSAs, retirement accounts, paid vacation, computer benefits, stock options, or educational reimbursement. Those are all things that you as an employer pay out or offer as part of having an employee on board. And on the other hand, the organization could pay the contractor an agreed upon wage for their services, but they won't withhold any taxes. So you can have both, right? Some companies, and I do have a client that has both. They have contractors for the bulk of what they're doing and payroll employees for most of like the day-to-day activities. Another major difference between a contractor and an employee as it relates to their level of independence is autonomy. And employees are hired to perform specific work at the direction of the employer, whereas independent contractors are typically given a job or a project without the company controlling when and how they do it. So, this is how we start to work into the gray area, right? With an independent contractor, you can give them the tools, you can give them the information to say, hey, this is how we typically do this. But at the end of the day, if they choose to do it completely different, that is legally acceptable. And you have to decide if this person, did it to your liking, if you're going to continue to keep them on board. But where we start to get sticky is we are not allowed to control like when something is due and how they do it. I really want us to be intentional about thinking about this because sometimes this gets lost. Sometimes I see some clients that have contractors give them very specific things on how to do it, when it's due. And I know typically, right? A lot of our things are deadline driven. We have to accept that. But there is a difference between you must make sure that everything is completed on your list by the time you go home today, right? That's more of an employee model of I have certain tasks, certain things that I need to do and have them completed by 5 o'clock today. Rather than what it looks like with a contractor is you say, I have these things. And in order for me to do my part as a business owner, can I have these things by the end of the week? And you're strategically working with that person on what their time constraints are individually, how their business operates, what boundaries they have set up in the contracts that you have with them. And so everything with a contractor is very contractually driven. And so in the contract, if the contractor says, I will have all assignments to you done by every Friday, then that is a parameter that the independent contractor has set up on their own behalf to say, as part of my business, as part of how I operate, this is when things will be completed. And as a business owner, you have to decide if that is something that you can work around. Having an employee is a little bit different, right? Because they are under the discretion of you. So you have to make sure that the deadlines are being met, that they are doing things properly, that you are doing those checkpoints with them to ensure that they are completing the project on time and it's staying on track. You can do that to a certain extent with a contractor. With a contractor, you're having a meeting of the minds. You are letting them know, this is my business. Projection is I need to have this part of the project done by this end so that the next phase of the project can kick off. And you're working together with the contractor to say, when are you able to sort of get these things accomplished so that I can start the other part of that, or you can start the other part of that? Right. So you can have these deadlines that are associated with the projects that the contractor has, but it's really that day to day, everyday check in, everyday assignment that is the gray area. So, as a business owner, we really have to be careful on what that looks like and the language that we are using behind it. When we are onboarding and training, we have to remember that that looks different for a contractor versus an employee. Onboarding and training process varies greatly because contractors are expected to focus on a specific project. They are often given the information that's crucial for completing the task, but the full-time employees require lengthy onboarding processes to understand all of the intricacies of your business, of the team that they're working with, the company culture, and the overall goals. So I want you to start creating this picture in your mind of, as an employee, there is an onboarding process, there is a company culture that needs to be put in place, there are goals that need to be set for this individual person. Whereas as a contractor, you're specifically hired to complete work in a project format. What do I mean by that? Projects can look like ongoing different types of projects. So, for me, for instance, one of my clients, I am responsible for all of the onboarding for employees. I'm responsible for training these individuals. And so, when we do the onboarding and the training process, that for me as a contractor is a project, right? I am essentially spending a time period working with an individual to get them onboarded, trained, and moving through the process as an employee. And when that project is done, it's done. I move on. Now, where it can get a little bit of a gray area is I am working through the process that the company has set up, right? However, I created that process. So while one could argue that I am sitting in this process that has already been built out, I'm actually the one that created the process. So it's not like somebody can come to me and say, well, you're doing an employee's work. I'm not. I'm actually doing my own work because I'm the one that created the process for the company. I am onboarding and training the individuals that are utilizing this process. So again, right? You have to get really, really intentional and you have to make sure that you can provide the checks and balances if you ever get audited, if the IRS ever comes and says, we need to know all of the tasks that the contractors did and all of the tasks that the employees did, and be able to stand in that and be able to say, these are sorted out of individual projects because this person did them from XYZ on their own expertise in their own zone of genius. Whereas as an employee, I already had these processes set up. So they are functioning out of something that is already existing. That is the big difference. What I will say to this also is that you being able to discern what is a project, what is something that I already have built within my company. Will that warrant me bringing on a contractor? Will that warrant me bringing on an employee? So again, with the same client, I'll just use her as an example because it's a wonderful example. With her employees, right? She started her company And she brought on 2 contractors to really help build up the company. She didn't have many SOPs, she didn't have many platforms, she didn't have any sort of processes or tools in place so that her company could move forward. So these 2 contractors worked side by side with her to be able to build all of that up. She then, when those processes were in place and things were functioning and we are doing the thing, she then decided it was time to move into having these employees. There are a lot of tax benefits to having employees, and we'll talk about those in just a second. But then as you backfill, right? Or have other areas, she began to bring on other contractors that were subject matter expert in their own area. And so when we're working in the day to day and we have the contractor on a certain project, we know that as a contractor, as it relates to her business, that that contractor has to have full autonomy over the actual project. And so that means that they are providing their expertise, they are providing their zone of genius, reflecting it back to my client and saying, this is what I would recommend for this area. This is what I would recommend for this area. And then the client here has a responsibility to say, yes, we are going to implement that on our end, or no, we're not going to implement that XYZ, whatever that looks like. But what she can't do is have this contractor do all of the work that is specifically attached to this project as it relates to what are the day-to-day activities. So you have to sort of piece that out, right? And create sort of that gap so that, again, if you get audited, if the IRS comes knocking at your door, you can say, no, 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 she owned this part of the project. And it's crucial to use the word owned. She owned this part of the project. We then took her expertise and her feedback and transferred it over to our employees who then did the day-to-day work on the actual materials because they were set up with templates and things of that nature. So, separating that out, understanding the zone of genius for each individual really helps you then identify, where am I walking into the gray area between contractor and employee? Another huge difference of an employee and a contractor is the degree of flexibility that they have in their work. An employee that works for a company is subject to the rules and the obligations by that company. Whereas a contractor, they have the choice to work for one or multiple organizations. So it is common, right, for contract workers to juggle several clients at a time. I have several clients at a time. And this level of flexibility can be seen as a benefit or a limitation. It just sort of depends on what type of work balance as a contractor or as a employee that you are looking for, if you are falling into that category. But for example, contractors can take time off whenever they feel like it. Whenever. I can reach out to my clients and say, hey, just an FYI, I'm going to be gone for 2.5 weeks in October. Okay. That's how it goes. Okay. Whereas if I'm an employee, I have to check with my employer, make sure that that time is available. I have to put in for time off. And then as an employer, I'm responsible for paying the PTO, the paid time off for that person that takes it, if that person has it available. So the flexibility is very great when you're a contractor. If you want to up and, go work in a different time zone, you can do that. I know some companies where they do allow for the employee, to work remote and kind of do a nomad style because it doesn't really, at the end of the day, there's no time constraints there, which great on that company for having that policy. But the level of the flexibility really can be seen as a huge trade-off when you are a contractor because you don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to wonder what their staffing need looks like because, is Susie taking time off at the same time I'm taking time off? Because if she is, I can't take that time off because then how is the work going to get done? Right? That's what an employee situation looks like. So, as a contractor, if you are a contractor, you have to decide, is it worth me giving up some of that flexibility in order to pay my own taxes and do everything that I have to be on the background? Sometimes. Other times it doesn't make sense, especially if you are tiptoeing on the line of doing the day-to-day activities that that company needs you to do. And it's now bleeding into I'm actually doing an employee's work instead of doing a contractor's work. So sometimes it just makes sense, right? To move that person over to an employee situation. And, if you find yourself a really amazing employer who values people, that means that there is an opportunity to have a conversation about what a very flexible schedule looks like. And I know some companies during a few bits of the year that they have, what's called the company shutdown. I have actually two clients that do a company shutdown right around Christmas. And it's not necessarily like, oh, company shut down, everybody's like off on holiday and nobody's getting paid. What that means is they scale way back so that they're not doing client work. There's opportunity for the contractor to take some lax time off to catch up on some of the projects that have needed to be caught up on, for the last quarter of the year. So again, if you find yourself a wonderful person while you're a contractor and they have that amazing flexibility, then there really is a benefit to you coming on as an employee. And what I would say then as an employer is to be flexible. People are human. Ironically enough, we all have the same beating heart. And so as an employer, you can have employees with flexibility. You can bring on employees that have a respect for your company, that have a respect for you, that want to see you and your company grow. There is opportunity to do that. And when you build a team that is based off of that culture from day one, what that looks like is those people wanting to show up every day to do the best work that they could possibly do. And when you have that and you gift them this flexibility opportunity, or you gift them a lot of the time that they're able to spend traveling, but still being able to work, it allows for you to open up the path for so many more individuals that are on the level that you need people to be on in order to work for your business. And so, as you think about building your business, as you work on building a company culture, it is very hot right now, but I think it has been pushing this way because people are starving for it, is the flexibility. In one of my clients, we have contractors that work all over the United States. As a person with contractors, who work all over the United States. As a matter of fact, she has some that work in Canada. You have to give that flexibility, right? However, she also has an employee that doesn't work in the same state as her. And there still is that flexibility of, here is everything that needs to be done. Here's the timestamps for that. I need it turned in by this day. And there's flexibility within that person of things are due by midnight. So, however you plan that out in your day, that's on you. And so she's able to be a mom, she's able to be a wife. And so, even looking at little bits of flexibility like that, if you have a company that is project driven, right? What does that look like? Can you give flexibility in the sense of, okay, we're meeting, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we're going to cover these projects as an employee? Here's the deadline, have them done by the time we get into our project meeting, whatever. So you're giving that flexibility to the employee to decide what is important, utilize their own zone of genius to be the author of their own work. And you're giving the flexibility of we're going to meet, we're going to have these healthy discussions, but there still is deadlines that are being met, right? And so when you can provide that to an employee, it's an amazing, amazing transformation. We've talked a lot about what an independent contractor is, what an employee is, how to distinguish between an independent contractor from an employee. And now let's chat a little bit about what happens if you've accidentally misclassified somebody. So the consequences for misclassification, they vary depending on whether the misclassification is deemed intentional or not. Most of the time you will find that a company has no idea on how or why they've misclassified an employee. And typically, a company will be required to pay back taxes, fines, and penalties that can be based on the number of IRS W 2s that the company has failed to file because of the misclassification, or and a percentage of wages in which the company failed to withhold the proper taxes. So that's a lot. That's a lot. And so that's why we're having this conversation. It's really important to figure that out. In extreme cases, businesses could face criminal penalties, and a worker that has been misclassified could be entitled to overtime pay if they worked in excess of 40 hours a week, as well as additional money. And if the worker is successful in a lawsuit against the company, they could be paid out punitive or liquidated damages. So, how do we make sure that we're not classifying, right? You got to go back and you got to listen and make sure that the daily work that they're doing is, as a contractor, that it's driven, that they're giving full autonomy and full flexibility. And as an employee, the difference there is that you are in the day to day. You are giving them very specific tasks on when it is due. And you are also providing payroll benefits, tax benefits, employee benefits, all of those things. So just want to make sure that you understand that if someone is misclassified, that is a huge, huge burden on you as an employer. One of the other things that I wanted to chat about just real quick is what some of these pro and cons are for having an independent contractor or hiring an employee. So some of the benefits of having an independent contractor is you probably will save a little bit of money. Even though most employers pay independent contractors more per hour than they would pay the employees to do the same work, it usually ends up costing employers more to hire an employee. Why is that? You will have to pay a number of expenses that you don't have to pay for independent contractors, right? We talked about some of these already: employer benefits, office space, equipment, reimbursements. You will also have to make sure that the required payments and contributions on behalf of your employees, which are usually Social Security, Medicare, state unemployment compensation insurance, workers' comp insurance. So that's another insurance that you as an employer have to carry. And altogether, these expenses usually increase your payroll costs about 20 to 30%. I typically tell people that it costs about 30% of that person's salary to onboard them and train them and get them set up. It really takes about 90 days in order to get that 30% back. So think about that. And one of the other benefits of using a independent contractor is you have the staffing flexibility. So it allows employers a lot of leeway in hiring and letting go of employees, which can be especially advantageous for employers with fluctuating workloads. So if you are busier during one time of the year than the other, it's sometimes nice to independent contractors off and on. And You can hire an independent contractor for a specific task, knowing that the worker will be gone when it's finished. That's more of a short term project situation. Another reason why companies like to hire independent contractors is workers' comp can be a bit of a rabbit hole, shall we say. And when you deal with workers' comp, it's a lot to deal with. And so sometimes they just don't want to deal with all of that. Another reason why hiring an independent contractor might be better for you is you reduce your exposure to lawsuits. So when you hire on an independent contractor, you have your own contract that lays out explicitly what the contractor is going to do, what are the implications if they don't do that, and what are the implications if the duties and timelines, whatever that is, are failure to meet. And so when you build out the contract, there's some legal language in there to protect both of you. Employees have a wide array of rights under the state and federal laws, and therefore, a variety of legal claims can potentially bring out against employers who are violators of those rights. And so, because an independent contractor are independent business people, they are not protected by a lot of these laws. And some of the laws that are available to employees but not independent contractors are things such as the right to receive at least a minimum wage for employees who qualify and the right to have overtime pay. So, as an independent contractor, you structure your contracts with the wage that you are charging your clients. And a client will say, "Yes, I can afford it. No, I can't afford it." That's on them if they want to do that. But sometimes you might not even be charging what minimum wage is. And if you are that person, you need to take a hard look at what you're charging your people. But that isn't the responsibility of the person that you are doing the work for when you're an independent contractor to come at you and say, "Oh my gosh, I am paying under minimum wage for you. Let me fix that." That's not their job. That is your job to charge and make sure that you are getting a compensatable income. And so, one of the other things that the employees have rights to is protection from employment discrimination on the basis of national origin, color, religion, gender, and so on. Independent contractors are still protected from race discrimination, right? They could open their own lawsuit if they are discriminated against for race. But as an EEOC employer, you have added legalities that you need to make sure that you are staying in the boundaries of from a federal perspective. And it's not just based on what your contract says with that individual. And available rights for the employees also are the right to form a union and the right to take time off to care for a sick family member or bond with a new child. So, depending on what your FMLA policy says and all of those things, that's going to look a little bit different for every employer. But they do have the right to be able to take that time off. And employees may also be able to sue their employers for wrongful termination. So even though in our country we have what's called at will employment, there still is legal parameters that as an employer, you have to make sure that you are terminating the employee rightfully. And independent contractors, however, cannot bring on this type of lawsuit. What I would say, though, is they can't bring on this type of lawsuit unless it infringes on the term of the contract that is in effect. So if they have been terminated from a project, or let go from their contract outside of the boundaries that the contract has been put in place, then that independent contractor is able to sue the person that they are working for. So, again, a lot of gray area here. We just want to make sure that we are minding our P's and Q's. But, some of the disadvantages of using independent contractors is you do have less control over what they are doing. And your independent contractors will come and go. Many employers use independent contractors only as a needed basis for relative short term projects. Sometimes those independent contractors don't come back, other times they do. It all depends on how you are building a bond with that person. And your right to fire an independent contractor depends on your written agreement. We just touched on this, but one thing I wanted to add is you don't have an unrestricted right to fire an independent contractor. Your right to terminate the independent contractor's services is limited by the terms of your written agreement. So if you fire an independent contractor, or if you fail to pay them within the boundaries, you could be liable for the breach of contract. And it is in that independent contractor's rights to say, I no longer am going to be working with you. So you need to make sure the language of your contract is properly written. And you might be liable for injuries that an independent contractor suffers on the job. In my area of expertise, that's not something that we necessarily have to think about a ton. But if you have an independent contractor, say it's an independent contractor who is doing roofing for you, and they get injured on the job, if they're an employee and they get injured on the job, they're usually covered by the workers' comp insurance that you pay out as an employer. For the benefits that they receive with their injuries, these employees give up the right then to sue their employer for damages. Independent contractors, however, are not covered by any type of workers' compensation. So, what that means for you is if Joe is out there doing roofing and he falls and he breaks his back and he's an independent contractor, he can sue you to recover the damages. So, you just want to make sure, again, weighing out the pros and cons of having independent contractors versus employees is what is the risk in your job? If your risk is low, you may be able to say, okay, independent contractors are the way to go because I don't have a high risk for them being injured on completing projects for me. So I'm able to take on that burden, and I have the capital and the other means of insurance to cover me should I need to pay this out. However, if it's something like roofing, lawn care, any type of service type work where they are using their physical bodies beyond their their hands for typing on a keyboard, then you want to really determine, should these be employees or should these be independent contractors? We are not going to talk about what it means to work under the table. I'm not even going to go there because I have my own opinions on the matter, but there's that. And the other thing is as a person that has independent contractors, you might not own the copyrights in the works created by the independent contractors. So if you are a person that sends out newsletters or you have the independent contractor produce any type of copy for you, you will want to make sure in the agreement, what does the copyright look like for that? Does the copyright look like when they are finished with the completed work, such as an article, book, photograph, you then become the owner of the work? Or is it that they keep as the owner of the work and you have a copyright to be able to use that work? So again, the fine print of your contracts, or if you're an independent contractor that works with copyrighted work, you need to make sure that you are providing at least a transfer of ownership or something from you as an independent contractor to the client. I would have that conversation between you and the client on what that looks like and what they need it for. And the final thing here is you face a risk of government audits when you have independent contractors. You just do. The government loves loves counting people, and they love classifying people as employees, not independent contractors. And the reason for this is financial. The more workers that are classified as employees, the more tax and insurance money flows through the government. So it's harder then for the workers to underreport and hide their income from Mr. Taxman here. And so any number of state or federal agencies might audit your business if they believe that you have misclassified employees. And at the federal level, it's a whole lot different than the state level. So not only do you have two entities that will potentially come after you for misclassifying employees, it's just a lot of burden to walk through that process of having an audit. What I would say though, to not deter you from having independent contractors is, again, having those clear boundaries. If you have clear boundaries and you can clearly distinguish what the person was doing as an independent contractor and what the person was doing as an employee, then you have no problem. When you think you could potentially be walking into a gray area, it's always nice to err on the side of caution to bring them on as an employee instead of an independent contractor. However, if you are not there yet with your business, if you are not wanting to be the manager of people and employees, then all you have to do is just make it clear on what's a project and what is a day-to-day activity. So I know that this was a lot of information. I know that this is sometimes super hard to digest, but it is so easy as an employer to understand once you get the base of what's an contractor, what's an employee in my business, and you separate those out, it is a lot easier then to work through the activities to be able to understand, is it something that I just need to do because I don't have the capacity to give it to a contractor, as it might fall into borderline needing an employee? So what are those tasks look like for me? Why are they different? And as an independent contractor, can I rely on that person to utilize their expertise? And I think we as business owners sometimes get caught up in, I like people to do things certain way. I would like it done this way. And I've done it this way for XYZ. I know how long it takes. I know what the tasks are that need to be done. But again, if you're working in this independent contractor space, you can't do that. I'm saying this gently and I'm saying it with love. You can't do that. You have to give somebody complete autonomy and respect their zone of genius for what they are doing for your company. And when you can bring on board independent contractors who love your business just as much as you do, who are jazzed to be there, who have ideas for your business, you then can look at them as a business bestie and lean on them and discern to them on making decisions for your business. And that just comes with time, feeling out the right people. But as a business owner, I want us all to understand that there are gray areas that we walk when having independent contractors and employees. And so it's up to you as a business owner to make sure that you are not crossing into that gray area. But I want you all to be encouraged that the key takeaway here is to get clear about your business. And when we talk about getting clear, it's writing down the business activities. And what does that look like when you bring on independent people utilizing their own zone of genius in order to propel your business forward? I hope that this gives you some insight to be able to make those decisions for your own business. If you are in the space of needing some extra conversation about what this looks like, feel free to slide into my Instagram DMs and I'm happy to have that conversation with you. I never want somebody to have barriers with the IRS. And so if you feel like you could potentially be dipping into that area, I'm happy to have a conversation with you and see what that looks like and reframe some of that for you. Until next time, you are stronger than you think.
Thanks for listening to That Big CEO Energy. If you heard something today that helped you, I would love it if you would leave a review and share it with your friends. This helps more people like you become inspired just like you are. If you would like to learn more about how I can help you streamline and position your business for growth or lead your business as a CEO, feel free to jump into the show notes with all of the links to find me, and don't forget to head over to Instagram so we can be pals.